ladies and gentlemen, we're fashionably late. We're not like late to where you're going to make it like hold it against us, right? It's just fashionably late. It's good to see you guys. It's good to be back. Finally, with one of the guys that I'm looking up to, and I've been looking up to for a little while now, and exploring his work. And we're here talking tonight. The wonderful Peter Eliott. How are you tonight, my friend?
Good, really good. Thank you.
So, real quick, where are you coming from? Where are you at tonight?
I live out on Eastern Long Island.
Okay, so in Eastern.
Yeah, so I'm out in a little town called Amagansett. Very, very quaint and pretty town. It's right on the ocean, and it's nice. There's a little dusting of snow right now out there. And yeah, it's a very peaceful, good place to live. I have 5 excellent libraries, like within 20 minutes at the far end. Some of them like 5 minutes. And
wow.
I rotate in these libraries, and I would say hundreds of thousands of words have been written in those places. So, when I choose a place to live or wherever I might even go spend an extended period, I like libraries, cafes, certain places. So I'm a person who writes out of the house much of the time.
What is it about being out of the house though that is just helps you write? What is it?
It's stimulating. Like I think probably my favorite thing is a coffee shop. I'm a big fan of hotel lobbies as well. And if said hotel lobby has like a cafe adjoining it, like that's the best. But yeah, something about the sound of the espresso machine going and the smells, and then people whisking in and out, doing their life, sometimes setting up like me with a laptop. And it's extremely stimulating. My work is, my writing is very character based. And so even if I'm not interacting with human beings, in that setting, I'm sort of absorbing the interactivity.
I think that's a great idea, and one that in the back of my mind, I'm just subconsciously like assume people do, the coffee shops, but never really thought about it like the way you just put it. And observing the human condition could probably be, and for you is definitely a stimulating part of the writing experience for you.
Definitely. I mean, I grew up on a small island off the coast of America called Manhattan. So a lot of stimulation, very urban, as urban, I guess, as it gets. So, and yet saying that, I like peace and quiet. So finding that perfect nexus of those two things, I feel like I, have it in my town, and then I experience that when I'm writing in a cafe.
Well, like you, where I'm at, it's very cold, but it's like kind of the opposite. So me and my wife, but by me saying this is no talking down to like people who love the city. Growing up, I didn't have a huge city, and especially now we're at the very beginning of the Appalachian Mountains in Ohio, and I would like to visit places like that, because one of my favorite things is culture and finding people whose days aren't like mine. I think what makes us different pulls us together and shows us each what we have in common, as well as but I guess what I'm getting to is I enjoy the peace and quiet as well, but it's wonderful to hear those other ideas as far as you enjoying living in a little bit more fast-paced. But it seems like you settled in an area that's right there in the middle. So I love that, man. And you get a little bit of whatever you want.
It's very seasonal. So a flood of people come in the summer months, and it gets very, very quiet in the off season. And I like both. There are some locals who really complain about the place getting flooded with people, but I mean, they're happy people. They want to be there, and I like that energy as well. So both are good.
You know what? I have to say, I like that. A lot of, I don't like negativity. And what you just said really was wonderful. It's taking something that somebody say, I don't like that. And you're making it a positive point. And I think that's a lot of what I try to do in my life. It's uh,
That's good.
having negativity really, it weighs you down.
Oh, big time. We have only so short a time here, and it's like you're gonna waste it that way.
Right. Absolutely, man. So I seen Shane, man, I seen your post like legitimately right before we popped on. So I have my biggest following, I would say, is between X and like the X app and YouTube. And Shane, the guy that I have here pulled up, wonderful reviewer. He got your book like legitimately today or yesterday, just in time for this interview. So I thought that was really cool.
Oh, that's great. Thank you,
Book
Shane.
one, A Dream of Shadows, which we're about to get into.
Okay.
First, though, would you just kind of introduce yourself as far as not the author side of you, but just a little bit about you on the other side, whatever that other side is for you?
Sure. Like I said, I grew up on that little island.
You a family man?
I'm married, but I don't have kids.
Okay.
Well, I leave that to the heroes like you, my friend.
I'm not a hero, brother.
And I have so much respect for people who have families. It's just not something my wife and I chose to do.
Respect it.
Yeah, but yeah, we have lived out here in this town for, I think it's getting on 18 to 19 years. Owned my home.
Somewhat established.
Yeah, owned my home since 2009. And I spent a lot of time in working in architecture and design. I'm not an architect myself, but I have I'm sort of like an amateur architect level of skill. But my job was, well, I was like a project manager for those jobs. So I ended up doing a lot of the drawings and what was connected to it, but I wasn't like the talent per se. But that was really very much to make a living. I didn't mind doing it, but and I still do it a tiny bit at this point. But I don't know. My aspirations as a kid were really to be a writer. And whenever you're ready to get to the writing part, I can tell you a little bit about that backstory. But I did spend have spent a lot of my adult years not doing that and earning a living.
It sounds like you're a responsible man.
Well, there was a juncture that occurred in my early 20s or somewhere in my 20s where I went, boy, I have a bad feeling if I pursue this writing thing, I'm probably going to fall into that category of the struggling writer guy. And I might like there's a train leaving the station to have the energy to do a career. It's not leaving right away, but I don't want to miss it. And so I didn't want to kind of wake up at 40 with the little Tweety birds going around my head going, oh boy, I didn't really think about something that actually makes money. Yeah.
100%, man. What I hear is you did what you had to and didn't necessarily hate doing to establish yourself, and then you followed your dream, man. I love that. And a lot of the time it's like I hear a lot of authors with a similar story. It's like I've always wanted to write, and I got myself set up in a position to where that was a possibility because I couldn't risk it's a big risk. Not everybody that starts writing a book, it necessarily goes to the, so many books, so many authors, but nonetheless, I think that it's equally as valuable in this community with a wonderful story like that, because 99% of them are that way, even the ones that are at the top of the list. So I just have a lot of respect for that, man.
Well, thank you.
So tell us about your work. In a way that, obviously spoiler free, a little bit of an overview, what people can expect, maybe just in book one, or just like the overall of the series, the name of the series, and your plans for it.
Great. Oh yeah, it's called the Shadow Bidder series. It's an extremely urban story. It's a it is a fantasy.
Mhm.
It's what probably, and I don't like this term, but what would be defined as low fantasy, in that it's not got a lot of some of the trappings of the high fantasy, meaning magic and monsters, and I call it the 3 M's: magic, monsters, men with pointy ears. So it's like,
Yeah.
it's a very realistic, human, gritty world. And at some point, a little bit later, maybe I can tell you the origins of that. But
100%.
it's I think it would fall into dark fantasy,
Mhm.
probably, insofar as it's gritty, it's quite violent. People have reported it's extremely pulse pounding. It's
Yeah.
like it's adrenal. Um,
Intense.
yeah, it's intense, and I try to channel a lot of evocative language and writing into it. So you are not watching at a distance, or that's the intention. You are literally feeling what's happening. You're smelling it, you're feeling it, you're tasting it in some cases.
In fact, I think like the first 2 sentences is something along the lines of even the smell would come with me, or like,
Yes.
you describe that, and I love that. And the way that you put the genres was way better than me explaining it to my wife earlier. She's like, it's urban. And I said, yes. And she's like, so I'm glad you did a lot better job than I did. It's a gritty, character-based, urban, low fantasy. And by that, you means it's not full of
Yeah.
extensive magic systems and
Yeah.
elves and this and that.
Yeah.
It's believable. That's a good word for it, I think, for me.
I have had some, the Amazon reviewers who I don't know, saying it was an exceptionally, one guy called it an adaptable world, which I thought was interesting. But then he defined that like he could adapt it basically to his life without a big jump, I think is what he meant by that. It's very criminal in nature. I need to make that out. It was very much my intention to set it in a world of criminals. Your main character is a criminal. Pretty much almost everybody you meet is some form of a criminal. But there are shades of gray in that respect. There are criminals by profession, but maybe not in their heart, in the depths of their heart. And there are those through and through, soaked through with the darkness of what they're up to.
I loved the aspect of I'm doing this so that my life can begin afterwards. So I think that's a huge feeling that was felt by me from the beginning. So I love that, by the way. It's kind of like I have to live this life, even if I'm not that person. Doing so is going to set me up, and I'm going to bite the bullet and get through this time of my life. At least that's the thoughts at the beginning, right?
Yeah, that's the inciting incident. Is the main character Vizier, whose his street name is Vizier the Lash.
Yeah,
but he's a smuggler, but a fairly violent man, and he accepts a contract that he knows is going to be, it's going to be deep shit.
yeah.
But it's like not the kind of contract you could walk out of. It's like it's a do or die, and he doesn't know what it'll be. It's an anonymous bidding system, but he steps into this contract because of the money involved. And then once he learns, he and his cohorts on this mission, what it involves, he's like, why did I step into that meeting chamber, basically? But there's no backing out. So it's one of those. It's like a team coming together, a shadowy team of operatives, to what turns out, this isn't a big spoiler alert. It turns out to be an assassination contract on pretty much the single darkest, most evil person in that world, in that, worst criminal of the group.
I would say that's definitely not a spoiler at all, because that's the assumption I made, not based off necessarily what I was reading, but in my mind, it's something along those lines. So I don't think you spoiled anything at all. So a couple things that I want to make sure I'm correct on, because I feel like I am, and I've done my research, but I just want to make for 100%. This is going to only be 3 books, or are you going to go beyond?
Okay, so this is the first trilogy in this world with this character.
Okay.
And it's interesting because my most recent Kirkus review
Yes, I'm gonna throw it up real quick.
Yeah, I wait on pin. Oh, well, that's the Kirkus review for Dream of Shadows.
Oh, hold on. Did I throw the right one up? Was it for the book 2 or book 3?
It's book 3, and it is just Jeff Brown, who's my cover artist, has just put it on there. So now it's in Amazon with the quote on there, but you wouldn't have that thumbnail yet, probably. So yeah, but on the Amazon site, you can see let's say the little catchphrase that they put at the end of the review.
Jeff Brown is the reason I know you. Like,
yeah,
100%.
I watched that interview. It was fantastic.
Oh, I'm so glad, man. That makes me happy, dude. He's such a good guy, man. Not only that, his talent is incredible.
Yeah, and I don't. It's hard to match him.
I'm gonna throw up. Here's book 1, A Dream of Shadow. By the way, these don't do it justice. It's
right.
so much better, and this is. I feel like I got the best quality I could.
Yeah, no, it looks great, dude. It looks great. And you can throw up the third one, and I can tell you what the quote is if you want.
I know you sent it to me, but I could have sworn.
No, I didn't send it with the because it just got updated. The Kirkus just. But
I would love to hear it. I know the viewers would.
That tagline over the building is let's see if I can remember it. It's a juicy one. A relentlessly paced, audaciously violent thrill ride through a richly described urban landscape.
Oh, yeah. Kirkus nailed. And look, what you said, right? I believe I heard you say this, or you sent it. Is the breaker of 1,000 hearts?
Yeah. I know a lot of writers who just wish they'd never gotten that review. They can be ruthless, and I've just been very lucky with all 3 books. Because
I think after 3, that's not luck, my friend. I think that's talent.
Yeah, I mean, they appreciated this most recent one of A Chasm of Night. Really got into a lot of the things that I'm happy that somebody would see, because I work with a lot of symbolism. I weave a lot of subtext into what I'm doing. They called it a rich narrative tapestry or something to that effect.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, but I've really appreciated their reviews. There are a few other reviewers I really, really respect that I have access to.
No, that's incredible.
I can't even remember what were we talking about before the Kirkus.
Let me just say real quick. This is what I absolutely love about doing lives is when we talk about one topic, it spreads on to 900, and I'm always here to pull us back. But that is what I love.
Good. So if I get discursive, I'm doing exactly what is supposed to happen.
Absolutely, 100%. I tell you what. Do you ever heard of Adrian Tchaikovsky, the science fiction author?
Yeah.
So I had him on, and I was extremely excited. Normally, I don't bring up other interviews during an interview, but just to let you, that was like my biggest interview, and I was really young in this, and my kids were home and they weren't supposed to be. Dude, they screamed the whole time. So like, there's nothing worse that can happen than that. So we're good, man.
Oh yeah. There's probably a few worse things, but I hear you.
Yeah. I guess I could think of some worse ones, but so what are so right now with the 3 books being out, is it an arc that's complete?
Thank you. Now I found that spot. It was like a lost UPS package. Now it's back, right? We tracked it. Yeah. What the Kirkus reviewer had said for A Chasm of Night, the third in the trilogy, was on some, and this was said in a complimentary way, on some level, this feels like a great prequel to a coming series.
Ooh.
And
on the third book.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
Yeah, the third book, and the way I end it, I bring a lot of the symbolism, a lot of the narrative elements, I tie them at the end, but it's also a vision at the future, clearly being presented, and I have every intention of writing a second trilogy or a quad, of set in that world a little further on in the future. And
I can always tell when I talk to an author just how hard it has to be to not spoil stuff. Because I'm imagining, like, in your brain right now, what can I say and what can't I say, but still let these people understand where I'm headed at.
Absolutely. I mean, that whole next series, I can't tell you how profoundly I want to write it. It's like I hear dialogue from it. I'm writing notes all the time. I think authors fall into different camps, or maybe there's a spectrum of how much they wing it and how much they absolutely construct it. I'm at the farthest end of the construct it phase. So
you outline.
I outline everything. I outline the plot, and I outline the thematic structure. It's almost like I have different layers, almost like Photoshop or something, like where there's the thematic, there's the imagery structure. There's a lot of things I'm setting up when I do a project. So I will be thinking about it way in advance and writing a lot of notes. And there are scenes that I wrote, let's say in this third book, that when I finally got to it, it had been several years. That scene had been living almost in exactly that form inside of me. And I didn't even need to pull up my notes. I had them because that's how much it was like, just like I've heard those people talking. I've seen the angle. I've seen the way the light's reflecting, I've smelled it, and then it's time to render it. And then there's always a little secret sauce, like something from just the muse comes that makes it not exactly what I thought.
Wow. And that's kind of discovered as you're writing.
That's what?
It's kind of something you discover as you write.
Oh yeah. Like it wouldn't be as much fun if there wasn't that just unexpected, sudden, oh, I know what she's going to say at this moment.
I love that. And for a couple of reasons, but the most important is I have from hardcore pantsers to those who do a little bit of both, to your end of the spectrum who do a lot of outlining and planning, and always I hear, because this isn't a personal because I'm not a writer yet, I hope to be, that the pantsers, I can't imagine having any fun if I outline. So what you're saying totally it's always a personal journey, and your journey is just as exciting for you as it is for a pantser. So I love to hear that side of the spectrum for you. And talking about you still discover a lot of things. You said your muses, things happen, and they were unexpected.
Absolutely. It happened. There were a few dramatic ones at the end of this third, book, Chasm of Night, where I literally just started laughing out loud. Like, I can't believe she said that. And I it really, but then I sat with it because it was maybe something so audacious. But I went, oh no, of course she would say that. And then I'm like, and then I be with it and I back and I fill and I go over it and I sleep on it and I come back and I'm like, no, that's it.
That's it.
Absolutely. It's set in stone. That is what was said at that moment.
I think it's cool because the way you're describing the way that you write, man, is I don't know if I'll be I wish I could be specific, because in my head, I want to make characters the way I want to make them, and then put them in the plot. And then I want the plot to be compelling, but how do I put these characters in? So I think it's a gift if you're able to see that before writing it. I really do. I think that's something that is a gift, of course. And I'm kind of jealous.
Well, I think when you set your mind to it, you're going to find, all kinds of parts of you will come to your aid that you didn't expect. I think most people actually have the creativity in them. It's just where they want to channel it. And if they choose to channel into writing, they're going to find parts of themselves they didn't know were there.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I think that's happening to me all the time.
That's awesome. And that's inspiring too, because I can see how that would work itself out. For instance, on a personal level, just haven't had any time with the kids and this, and when they're a little bit older, allowing that time to be used in the passions that I have, I can see something naturally occurring like that.
It will. How old are your kids? How old's the youngest?
They're pretty young. So 5, 4, 2, and 1.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
All right. Hey man, I'll see you in 20 years, buddy.
Yeah, right. I just have to laugh, right? Because I know. No, they're beautiful,
it's
man.
before that, and it's a great life enriching experience. I can only imagine.
It's a life enriching and daunting and chaotic and loving and crazy
Yeah,
all at the same time, man.
it's
And
awesome.
so when was it for you in this journey of yours that you can place the epicenter of your passion for literature igniting?
Okay, well, if I could just amend it a little bit to the decision to be a writer, and then it followed through to the passion for literature. They became connected. I had a really like a strong seminal event at 13 that was kind of a life altering um, incident where so I grew up in Manhattan, as I said. And I had been writing stories, I think, as most kids do. A lot of them were just class assignments. Write a story as your favorite animal, or tell a tale of adventure or whatever. And I couldn't wait to do it. I had probably the worst handwriting, that a human being has ever been plagued with on this planet, and couldn't spell. And so I my heart goes out to those teachers that had to deal with pages of those like little lined notebooks of that scrawl. But anyway, somehow they figured it out. But they did say I was very imaginative, and they when they got through all that, they enjoyed what I was writing. So I kind of conceived of myself as a story writer, teller, person. And then at 13, a missive went out to pretty much all schools in Manhattan, that there was a short story contest.
Ooh.
So it was it was the whole city, or a wide swath of schools in the city. And the first there were, I think, maybe 2 or 3 age categories, the oldest being 13, and I was 13. So I was in the heavyweight the category. But the prize, and this is, mind you, back in 1981. But the prize was $75, which doesn't sound like a lot, but for a kid in general, it was a lot, and at that time, it was a lot.
In the 80s, yeah.
Yeah, and the cherry on top was that Isaac Asimov would hand the prize out. So I'm assuming people here know who that is. One of the grandfathers of science fiction. And the only requirement for this story was that it had to be set in New York. So anyway, I got to work and I composed this story, and maybe influenced because I knew it was Isaac Asimov and thought maybe he'd be one of the judges. I set it in the future. Mm-hmm. So it was a kind of dystopian vision of New York City after its fall, after its heyday was long over. And it had, some elements maybe of like Blade Runner and that feeling of a kind of defunct society in the shadow of, let's say, people having moved on and gone elsewhere. And the name of the story was Ruins. Anyway, so I put a lot of attention into it, and then I submitted it, and time passed. And this is just one of those flashbulb moments in my life. I came home from school or wherever I had been, and I opened the front door of my apartment, and my older sister, was there. And she was like bouncing off the walls, like, she's like, sit down. Where the hell have you been? Sit down. And so she sat me down on this little couch, and she said, that citywide contest you entered? And she's like, you won first prize.
Whoa.
Yeah. And I mean, that was like a supernova going off in me. And so that the first thing that came out of it, after I can actually see the room kind of going, but like not long after that, I'm like, okay, this is definitely something I'm going to do. And I want to be an award-winning author. Like that was the 13-year-old mind was thinking, someday when I'm big, I'm going to do that. And that really set me on the trajectory of what I wanted to do. Now, you might find it strange that I waited so long to get around to writing. And I did write a novel in college, and finished it after college. It was a literary fiction novel. It wasn't fantasy. And it was, some people said some nice things, but it really wasn't good enough to publish. And then I started Dream of Shadows. Had a different title. That's another funny story at that time. And that's a lot of years ago. But then I got married and I was partially into it. And I said, and that's when I had the thought I described earlier. Like, I don't have a good feeling about trying to pursue this at this time. Like, I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait till I'm financially secure. And then I'm going to get back to it. And that was the judgment call. So that was the writing aspect. And then from that followed, I wanted to read good writing. So I wanted to read. So I was a, English literature major in college. And interestingly, there was a moment in high school when I was in the high school library, and there was this book on the rack, at one of the racks. And it had a kind of cool looking cover. There was a guy on it holding a sword. And I picked it up. And all over the back of this book was the most praise I've almost ever seen written on a book. New York Times, Boston Herald, the Washington Post, a masterpiece, a major piece of fiction of the 20th century. Blah, blah, blah. It was just filled both flaps. And I'm like, and it's a fantasy book? I'm like, what the F is this? Mm-hmm. Anyway, it was Shadow of the Torturer by Gene Wolfe.
Oh yeah, dude.
Okay, the first book and book of the New Sun.
Yeah,
and that was a moment when it occurred to me, fantasy can be literature. Those two things can go together. Because I hadn't really experienced that. The books I'd read in fantasy were, they were fun, but I wasn't going to call them serious fiction. But this clearly was. And so that book had a massive impact on me. And of course, I've read a lot of varied literature at this point. But that was one of those influential reading moments.
I haven't had an author yet say that Gene Wolfe was an inspiration. And I've talked to some
really who was or wasn't?
Authors and little authors, and as far as the spectrum as popularity goes. And I think that if you are inspired by his work, man, and you can understand it, because that's a huge, that book, that series is not for everybody.
No, it isn't. And it's not what I would call pulse pounding, like thrilling, but it is deep,
profound.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. And I think that it's a perfect, and again, I haven't read a lot of his work, but from what I understand, that'd be a really good study. Depending on the route you want to go. I'm still waiting to tackle his work because I'm not an experienced reader, per se. Been reading for 6 or 7 years now, but some things like Malazan or Gene Wolfe. I haven't read Isaac Asimov yet. Not that I won't or that I can't. I've been intimidated to pick their work up. So to hear that was an inspiration of yours is very cool.
Yeah, it definitely influenced me in a big way.
And also, and my wife took the words out of my mouth, how you were talking about your journey and your realism when talking about your journey. Sometimes we have to postpone things we really want and focus on what's financially suitable at the time. But I love that you came back to it. Yeah. Me, if I put myself in your shoes and I just got married and I want to write a book, but also my future isn't concrete, or at least as concrete as I can make it. I can understand how it would take away from your creativity. That would be a hard spot to sit and write a novel.
Yeah, and I can't do it that way. I really, I'm like I said, I'm at the most extreme one of the ends of the spectrum, which is when I've even completed a manuscript, and it's not all that rough by the time I complete it because I'm going back over it all the way through. Even after that, I probably go through it 20 to 30 times every word. I need every word to be right, literally. And it, 500 word, 500 page novel. It's a lot of words.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying others have to do that. I'm just telling you that's the OCD guy that I am. Like I can't send something out in the world unless it's absolutely the best thing I can send to the world.
I think the most unique thing that I've found as a human being in like all of my 34 years is the writing process. It's pretty unique. I don't know. I couldn't name another thing right off the top of the head that is more person to person, more individual than that. Because it doesn't matter like your process or this or that. Like everybody's like we could all, what is there, like 7-8 billion of us on this planet, something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm probably way wrong.
I think you may be right. Yep.
If we were all to write the same story with the same characters with the same plot, you'd get 7 billion different stories.
Yeah, you
like
would.
You'd find a similarity, but they would be very faint. They would all be recognized through that person and how individual they are. So every time I get to hear somebody's process about how they and how that's a part of their life, even it's really cool.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I came out of the Gene Wolfe experience, with a desire to someday get to a very urban version of, like a deeper urban, fantasy. And going back to that story, Ruins, that I mentioned, it's funny how much, you may have, like, your ears might have perked up when I said that, because having read Dream of Shadows, it's all about a fallen city living in the shadow of its former greatness. So, so many of those, that's why I call it a seminal event. So many of the things that, and it was criminal, there was a whole criminal element in that short story that I wrote. So, all the seeds were kind of laid with that. And then, the Gene Wolfe experience, I said, I love it, but I'm not going to copy Gene Wolfe. I can't. But it's not even what I want to do. Like, he's got his space. He's got his sort of deep reflections on human history and are present in that book. It's like, I want my stories to move. Like, I want people to be like, can't even sleep when they're reading, and I've had people say that about the books. Like, I have to kind of look at the clock and say, I got to stop Eliott stuff by 6 p.m. because, like, I'm going to be up all night, and I really mean that. I'm not just saying that. Like, I've heard people say it, and I think you can probably concur that when that thing gets moving.
That's what I meant earlier when I was saying compelling. It's an intense, I've seen not a lot, but just a couple of the reviews that I've seen, because I always like to go and check out reviews and after I've started reading a book, not necessarily like my reason for picking up a book, just to kind of see what other people's experience was. And it's a consensus of the intensity, the fast paced, the character depth. And for me, it was with the opening scene, especially, like, I picture this dark kind of, not necessarily dungeon, but like a shack, like a wooden shack, maybe even like a log cabin, but not in the bright, beautiful way we would pick up maybe like an epic fantasy,
right?
But just like a congregation of people who typically aren't seen,
Exactly.
typically aren't caught with one another,
exactly,
showing their face just when they have to.
Exactly.
And I love that. I love that feel. It's almost like almost like we're not supposed to be here, but we have to be for just a second.
Yeah.
And I like that sneaky feel. I like that overall theme.
Well, yeah, that's what the shadow bidders are. They step out of the shadow just long enough to bid on a contract, and then they disappear again. And that's the premise. And I
love that.
I said it, the whole story takes place over, but technically 72 hours, but the heart of it is 48 hours. And that's unusual for a fantasy novel.
Yeah,
very. And it's claustrophobic. Like it is basically that, city within a certain environs. And that was all very much deliberate. Like I wanted to just keep it tight, keep it focused like that.
It 100% delivers in that way.
Can I share something
Please.
so there was I love my seminal moments, right? But when I was a kid, I used to play D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, and a lot of the campaigns I guess I was involved with were more what you would expect, like Dungeons and Dragons, monsters and orcs, and how most people ran campaigns. And then into my world at that time came something. I'm going to do a little show and tell, an image. And I know when you had the Jeff Brown interview, you talked about the power that an image can have, right? Like a cover can just hit you like a bomb. What I'm going to show you was like a bomb. And people may or may not recognize it. I don't know the age of your viewers, but if you're of a certain age and you like fantasy and have liked fantasy, this image, and I actually contacted the artist to get a print of this.
Oh, that's awesome.
But if anybody knows what this is the cover for Thieves World.
Thieves World.
Yeah. And this was a series. I'll let you look at it.
I love that.
Yeah, and it said Thieves World up here. When it was, what I saw first was the box set in Dungeons and Dragons, but there was a series of books that it was derived from, and it was a bunch of short stories that the fantasy authors of that day came together and wrote. But what drew me to it was, and I loves me a good monster and I love some magic, but this world said to me, this is a world of humans. Like
I've never seen that picture, and I feel familiar with it based on reading your work.
This is like gritty, again, it said Thieves World. So it was like, this is gritty criminal assassins and thieves, skullduggery, living by their blades, by their wits. Doesn't say to me this magic or monsters or any of that. Again, nothing wrong with it. It's just, and from that moment, like I actually constructed a whole D&D campaign around it. And the city there was a city that was associated with that series called Sanctuary. And I did some campaigns in that. But then I constructed my own sort of with that flavor, but quite different. But, the underlying criminality, and it was Soulward. So I actually invented the city that's, Dream of Shadows in these books back at that age, like 13, 14 years old, whatever I was. And a lot of these characters were drawn from then. So that's how much depth and longevity it has.
This had been brewing.
Yeah.
And when you were able to put this in your life and actually pursue it, you were ready. And I love that because it had been steeping. What is it though? I'm curious. The aspect of criminality and kind of that wrong part of, modern society, that wrong side of things, that attracts you so much.
It's a heck of a question, Matt. My cousin assures me we're the same age. He says whenever we would play cops and robbers, you wanted to be the robber. Like every Halloween, I wanted to be a pirate. I don't know what it was. Like I'm not a criminal, and
you certainly don't come across as one.
And I'm a real law-abiding guy. Like I respect law and order, and I don't know. It's like a fascination. I found the mafia fascinating. I grew up in New York, and it's like I do think we can do that. Like we can be utterly fixated or interested in something, but not have to be it ourselves. But it just titillates us.
100%.
I would never want to go to war, but I'm turned on by a war movie. I'm turned on by the gritty, immediacy of human beings in that combat situation. So yeah, I think
I have to agree with you on all of that, especially what you said last, the immediacy, man. It's like how final is death,
right?
Like how infinitely final and forever to be final, no matter how many memories there are, is death. What's up? I just seen him pop in here, man. The amazing Jeff Brown. We're just talking about you, brother.
Yeah, Jeff's called me out on this one.
He said that's what all the good criminals say. I'm a good one.
I'm a law-abiding guy.
I think too, those, you've lived a life that has a lot of life to live. I'm not saying that you've done the right thing. And as a guy who tries to do the right thing, it's often a fantasy type thought to say, what if I could, or not the fact that I've done this, but what if I think about doing this, or I never could, or I never would, but wouldn't it be cool if, being a part of the mob, especially, like there's definitely so many aspects to the Godfather, or being that guy at the top, and just meaning what you say, and people listening to everything that you have to tell them. So it's definitely titillating to think those type of thoughts.
Well, my main character, Vizier, he's in that world. He's of that world. He can himself be quite violent, as you know, and yet he's a cultured man. So
it's like there's not many characters where I'm like, I read all these bad things, or like memories of bad things where they're terrible things, but I still have a hard time believing, not that I believe he did or didn't do it, that it's possible, because I think you're right. From the character you've created in Vizier, it's easy to still believe that he's a good guy. And that's not easy, I feel like, to write something like that, to where there's lots of bad stuff happening, memories of bad stuff, bad career, but at the same time, and bad I mean is in doing bad things, harmful things, violent things, but also believing that character is a good-hearted person and just kind of doing what they selfishly have to do to get to that next part of life so that they can live that life.
Yeah. Well, he's definitely an anti-hero. He's, he is self-critical, and he's very quick. He's very quick to point out his own flaws, which I think is always a saving grace, right? It doesn't let you off the hook, but it's certainly preferable to somebody who has no self-reflection.
If you reflect on the bad things you do in life, it says something about you that's inherently good. Because a psychopath doesn't necessarily say, man, I really feel bad I did that. It's not a thought. It's those good ones.
They don't have access to that.
Exactly. I love that. David, what's going on, brother? Being an author allows us to explore the dark corners of society and thoughts. That's what makes storytelling so epic.
Yeah, agreed, David. I mean, that's the beauty of being a writer. You yourself can probe, and you can bring people places they would not otherwise get.
Yes. And that's something, it's funny, man, because I always kind of like recap on it with everybody I talk to, because it may not be assumed, but I didn't read as a young person. I didn't read in high school. Like I think I read one full novel by the time I was 29, and I was in a dark place. I was in the hospital, and it was like I spent a lot of time in the hospital. Couldn't find that thing for me. And it was reading, which I would have bet every penny that I ever earned, that, like, if you'd have told me I was going to be a reader when I was 29 and forever after that, I would have never believed you. Like, it wasn't a possibility for me. So that just kind of plays in and speaks to that part that you and David are talking about. Storytelling can be so epic, and so it can speak to many points of the human condition. And I love that.
I'm so glad you shared that story, Matt, because I have a friend, my best friend, and he's also an avid reader. He reads like really, really deep stuff. He sticks to a lot of the classics, but he takes notes as he reads. I mean, he's an amazingly intellectual and intelligent guy. And he once just said the simplest but truest thing I think can be said, for me at least, on the subject, which is reading literally makes me a better person.
It does.
Yeah.
Intellectually, emotionally.
Yeah.
sociologically, economically, vocabulary wise. I mean, history,
Yeah,
imagination.
absolutely. I just think that when I meet people who don't read, first of all, I'm baffled because I think they're denying themselves such a pleasure. Yeah, I know there's a lot of good Netflix shows and we all watch them, but
Yeah.
it's like, it's not the same experience.
No.
It's not the same experience, but I think that when I hear that, I'm like, yeah, it's almost like you got one eye closed a little bit in this life because
I
you're
think that
yeah,
not allowing the experience to happen, or for me, this is kind of what it was. It was like I didn't allow that experience to happen to me. And if I did, like for instance, that one novel I read, I didn't fully allow that experience to happen to me. Like I didn't commit to it. I didn't truly try to find anything to bring out of it. But when I did allow myself, and I think it kind of, for me personally, it took that kind of dark moment in my life to try something new and allow it to work the way that it was going to work for me, and it did.
mhm,
Like my dad, I can't get him to read for nothing. Like I've given him books, I've let him borrow books, and
right.
like, and he just is not a reader, man. He won't. He's just not. And that's not, whatever. That everybody's got their thing, but it's at the end of the day, it's like I think if somebody was to allow it to work for them, or try to pull something out of their reading experience that meant something to them personally, I
Yeah.
think a lot more people would read nowadays
Well,
rather than watch Netflix.
I like your story that you're 29, so you're technically past all those early markers where it's like you changed your brain or made it ready to do that, and yet you can still do it.
Yeah.
And when somebody says to me, because I've reached out to a lot of my friends in life and asked them to read what I wrote, and um, and they some have just said flat out, I literally can't do it.
Yeah.
I
That's
just
how I felt.
and I look at him like, what do you mean you literally can't do it? It's like, no, I
Attention.
can't do it. And that was like spooky to me. And I think it's gotten way worse with all the little devices
Mm,
that we all have, and the little, pithy ways that information is being conveyed to us. Um,
yeah.
but I try not to look at that too much. I mean, there's a bunch of barbarians at the gate. There's AI, there's shortened attention spans. There's everything gets turned into a show, so why bother reading the book? Like, so there's a lot of like existential threats to the whole thing, but I try not to look at it too much and say, hey, there's going to be Matts out there, there's going to be people who are going to read, and I'm just writing for them. I'm writing for myself and I'm writing for them.
Yeah. I love that. And to kind of your point about everything trying to take our attention, I don't know if I necessarily believed it for me until I saw my kids. Like one of the things me and my wife are doing, because we want to be good parents. So we're loving people. We want our kids to grow up and know that we love them and come around. To us, before we're parents and experienced parents, we think give them what they want, give them, something to
Right.
do. And as soon as that screen comes in front of their face, it's on a scary level. Like I've seen my oldest one, and it's scary to me still. Like when he doesn't have a device in front of him, and he's not even 6 yet, um, and hasn't had a lot of time to even like experience a screen. Like it just happens that fast, and it's being dialed back. But just as almost, it was like an experiment, but not really. It's not like I meant to be, but it was very telling. How quick your attention span can be shortened
Yeah.
so small. I seen it
I
happen right
wouldn't
in
have
front of my face.
believed that until I've witnessed it around me. And I can't, I'm happy to say it hasn't really happened to me. I think because of what I'm doing, I can't afford a short attention span. Like it's just it doesn't suit what I'm doing. But it's like I'm kind of doing an Olympic level workout of my mind by doing that. And so it's not happened to me, but it's all around me.
And you grew up at a time, and we're not like far away. I grew up in the '90s before all of this happened too. Like,
Yeah.
um, but it's been a lot of my life that it's been around. So I'm somewhat guilty of it as well. But I think
Yeah.
those who, such as yourself, was able to have an experience as a child in the '80s without
Yeah.
phones and Netflix and all of this and internet, it's not in your bone marrow, if you will.
Right.
And I think
Exactly.
as kids nowadays, modern kids, it's just there. Like it's just
Yeah.
there. And
Yeah.
that's unfortunate. But,
It is.
we do what we can do to make it better. And I think
Yeah,
making
well, you sound like a great parent, and yeah, it's extra work for you to chaperone them from all of these devices that their friends have. That takes a strong, it takes spine.
well, I just want them to grow up to be good kids and happy. That's
Wow.
all. And I don't think that any kid that just puts their, and this is just my opinion, I think anybody, even an adult that just spends their whole time like absorbing content or spending all their time on the TV or PlayStation or whatever, there's not going to be much that comes out of that. I think that reading is a wonderful thing, and it does a lot for you that nothing else does. And I didn't know that until I had my own experience with it.
That's awesome.
So, if you're writing, are you reading? Or are you a big reader nowadays? And if
I
you
am.
aren't writing, are you reading?
I'm always reading. Um, I don't read all that fast, but I do read every day. And I do try to steer. I'm a little careful what I read, because it needs to not be too in either influential or discordant
Mm,
to what I'm writing. A lot of my literary influences are not from fantasy. They're more from what I'd call literary fiction. Um, it's I'm a little bit weird this way, and I haven't really met others like this, but I pretty much read literary fiction, but I think like this.
hmm.
So like
No,
I think adventure, I think fantasy, low fantasy more a little bit than high fantasy, and then I absorb more literary fiction. It's just my thing, But and then when there's an overlap, sometimes like a la Gene Wolfe, then I love that too. But yeah,
Joe
so
Abercrombie talks about how Lonesome Dove. He's like, if I read fantasy, it feels like I'm working. He's like, that's my job. I like to read literary fiction.
yeah, yeah. I don't even know if it's that. I just I feel more fed by that writing. But to each their own. We all go back to our wellspring, whatever it feels like for each of
Yeah,
us.
absolutely.
But
So
I mean, can I just say this? I
please,
would I would say that, like, if I had a single mission as a writer, um, just a personal mission, it's to merge or marry the literary with the thrilling. Like, if I could merge, because I don't see that done that often. It's quite rare. Like, literary fiction, which I love, is going to be usually poetic and evocative. It's going to have symbolism in it. That's going to be addressing deeper human issues. Um, but it's not usually that exciting or in any way heroic. It's a lot of suburban divorce dramas and alcoholism and whatever's
real
present.
life though, like that
Yeah,
makes
it's real life. It's real life, but it's usually eminently unheroic in its tone. Um, so you have that one spectrum. Then you read genre fiction, let's say good genre fiction, and it's going to move along quickly. It's going to sweep you away. It's going to take you, on a wild ride. The emphasis on the writing is going to be less. It's probably not going to have a lot of symbolism and poetry woven into it. But it serves its purpose. But I just felt like I don't almost ever see the two as one, and
that's a great point.
I would like to do that. Now, I can't promise I have done that, but it's what I'm trying to do. I'm
No,
always trying to do that.
I would have to say a couple things. Like, first, I feel that's probably the reason I had such a hard time. As much as I love your writing already, it's like explaining the genre based on what I've read so far. It was a little hard because you do a good job of mashing the two. When it's fantastical, right, fantasy or sci-fi, it's usually that 100%, or at least
Right.
90, 80%, where it's a made up world, a made up magic system that doesn't
Right.
exist. And You use a lot of your imagination, and that's the fun part of those novels. So mixing, um, what was the book I read? Was it Copperhead? I can't remember. It was about a girl and growing up in like the bayou, and her family was, alcoholic, but real life things that you witness or feel or be a part of, and unfortunately have to live with sometimes. Right. Mixing those two is surely authentic.
Yeah. Well, it's a thrilling quest to be on for me doing this, and I don't really have any doubts about that's what I'm going to do. And each writer's got their space, and I respect that. And that's the space I want to be in, and the quest, I'm on.
That's incredible, man. You know that. That's if there's nothing left to question there, and I think that's powerful. So what's a piece of advice you would give someone starting this journey as far as they're writing their first draft of their first book and want to do the self-publishing thing and write what they want to write?
Well, I mean, the getting started part, I think, that's kind of straightforward. It's just like, just set your discipline. Like I'm a really disciplined writer. I actually use I use spreadsheets where I'm hitting word counts every day. I've tracked it out. I can see the trajectory of where that will land me at X month, and so on and so forth. And it's not a wildly ambitious count because I take a lot of time. But for me, that helps guide me. And I know I got to, I have a running, like a running average, and sometimes I fall behind the count. Sometimes I'm ahead of it, but, that's a personal thing. One doesn't have to be, quite so anal about it as that, but some deal you make with yourself where you say, I have these targets. And even though I might sit down and like the screen is just looking so blank to me and I can't fathom up anything out of myself. Well, I have this obligation to myself. I've got to hit this count. So
that's how you would do it.
I would, because it's in there. It's in there if you dig. The problem for, I think, a lot of us is you hit that discomfort. And then there's that, I'm going to go get another coffee, or, you know what, I just got to take a walk around the block, or, I'm going to just check my phone. Come on. Like there it is all the time, that, the main drug. And there was this discomfort and you backed away from it and then you just didn't do it. But actually, if you had something, a pact with yourself that made you go through the discomfort, there's often rewards through that.
Oh, I love that. That's discipline, and that's something that I hope to ever grow. I really do. And
I felt it recently. I was starting a chapter. I had been in a good flow. I'm writing something now, and I just didn't feel anything. I knew what it needed to do. I had mapped it out, as I said, but I wasn't feeling it. And I was like, ooh, that doesn't often happen to me. But I had a lot of backlog of confidence, having pushed through so many moments like that. And I just forced myself. It was agonizing a little bit. And then what do you know? The little fairy dust starts happening, like that creative thing. I'm like, oh, yeah. I see what this is about. I usually look for an emotional hook, something in the scene that's going to resonate with something in me. That's usually a little asymmetric. I've said that about building characters. Look for the asymmetry. You don't just say, this guy's gruff, as you're describing it to yourself, creating the character, and he's kind of a burly guy and he does this. That's okay. That comes later. What's the conflict in this person? What is the little inner war going on in them? And when I identify that, because we're all like that, let's face it, we have discordant parts that are hitting each other. When I find that, in a character, in a scene, the fact the scene will bring that out, that's when the little feeling goes off. And then I start being able to push on.
It's said all the time, and I have to agree, although I have to say in my young life, it was more so than now, because I was a big sports player and you had a coach there to push you through those shit times, right?
Yeah.
But I think if you can put yourself through those shit times, being uncomfortable will grow you 1,000-fold.
Yeah, I think people with coaches at that age that you're describing who pushed them, made them run those laps, whatever, you did learn a little bit of that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And it is translatable, believe it or not,
For
to
sure.
an intellectual activity. It is, because it's the same party that knows how to push through pain for a reward. Pain
I
for a
would say
reward.
intellectual pain's worse, man. Like
It can
physical
be,
pain sucks, but like mental, like if you can get through that.
definitely.
Oh, I love that, man. There's a lot of aspects that you talk about within your writing and you as a person that I truly admire, and I can see in your writing as well too.
Thank you, sir.
Um, so I've appreciated that. What are you working on and what's coming up for you?
Okay, so I'm not gonna I'm not gonna reveal the title or the
Sure.
details too much, but I will just say this: one of the characters who's present in the Shadowbitter series, I am going to take that character, or I'm more than halfway through. I'm about 2/3 through that character's upbringing
Okay.
in this same city, Hell's Labyrinth, Soulward, which is nicknamed Hell's Labyrinth. It's that person's upbringing there. So, what I like about it is I'm staying in my world. For people who have read this series, I would hope they'd be interested to read it. But those who might come on board with that series, it's not required. They're mutually exclusive from each other. They'll complement each other, but it's not like the other series I was telling you, which comes in the future of the Shadowbitter series. That one, I'm going to try and write it so that you could get away with just getting on the ride there, but I wouldn't recommend it. But this one, it's fine either way.
I like that anybody's work. So your first trilogy being done, like having a next piece of work from you that is accessible as well, that may even be something you could market for the next, if they decide to read what you're writing now and then go on to what you've written already, vice versa. I
Yeah.
think it can only be something that helps story,
It's
literature wise, and marketing.
Yeah, and it's a female lead. So that mixes it up, and it's not a first person. The Shadowbitters is a first person. It's a third, but it's what I would call a tight third, meaning
Okay.
you are not. It's not an omniscient third. You're not jumping around to the perspective of other characters. You're staying close with her. But so that opens up new doors, and I found it absolutely thrilling to write a female character at that. I mean, there's a lot of female characters in the Shadowbitter series, and there's many
Yeah.
more. As you get to the next books, they actually become rather dominant.
Okay.
But this one's like very much in that perspective, and I enjoy that. I enjoy trying to channel it, doing my best to channel that perspective.
And I feel this way about getting female fantasy authors or sci-fi authors, or really any, because it's not necessarily just those two genres that I like to talk to. I like to talk about authors, poets. I've had poets on, illustrators, editors. I like
Yeah.
all that. So one of the things I'd love to have more of is that female perspective, because lots of men write and read the female perspective. So to hear how that process goes and what they put into the work as well is I think for a man, for me, it would be challenging to write that, point of view. So to hear that from the author as well would be very cool. So to
Yeah,
hear that you're tackling
it's
that.
very rewarding too, and before I go anywhere with it, I'm running it by. I'm going to give it the wife check, and she's just going to be like, "Oh, a girl," because it's actually a girl. Wouldn't think that, or wouldn't feel that, or wouldn't, and so I'm like, but I think I don't think I'm far off. I think I'm in pretty good territory, and then be very, very humble about that when I have her read it, because I'm stepping out of my own gender to do that.
Yeah, that's absolutely. So we have some stuff on the way, guys. I highly, so all of his, by the way, all of Peter Elliott's links, as far as I know that you have, are below. If I'm missing anything, I'll add them. Let's see. Amazon is where they can pick your work up.
Yes.
I've got your website below. I've got Instagram. I can't see it right now, but I know I've got a couple others. So if you guys when you guys go to find out more about what he's doing or grab his books, that's all going to be below. I just want to say thank you so much. I know it's been a kind of crazy past couple days, Peter, and I just really appreciate you being patient with me and coming to hang out on the channel for a little bit. And it's been very cool and eye-opening to hear about you and your process and your life and inspirations.
Thank you, Matt. You're an awesome dude. I really love what you're doing. Having heard your story tonight, your reading journey, that was very inspiring, and I kudos to you and being a family man as well.
Well, I appreciate that, man. That means a lot to me as well, because, us guys, we're always really good at beating ourselves up. So it's always lovely to hear that type of stuff, man. So again, I appreciate you being here. Everybody that was here live, you guys have been awesome. Please go pick his work up. It's wonderful. This will not, as long as I have anything to do with it, be the last time I have Peter on. Of course, I always love to have people back on for second, thirds, fourths. And the next interview will be announced very soon. But I always have to say the YouTube stuff that I'm always uncomfortable to say. But nonetheless, hold on. So one thing for Senna, she only does audiobooks, has a harder time reading. Is there an audiobook on the way potentially for any of the books?
Yeah, definitely. I'm as a self-published author, or a small tiny publishing house I have with my wife. It's a big expense and it's a big undertaking. And I want to do it well. Like, it will not be some AI voice reading it. I'm going to get an actor, and because there are a lot of accents and things in my book, and it needs to be done right. So I think probably, latter portion of next year, I think we're going to be seeing that, and I'm going to roll them out as I can.
I love that. There you go, Senna. And I'm an audiobook person myself, but I do read a lot as well. So I love both.
Yeah, no, I understand. There's a lot of future of book writing going into audio, and I got to be with it. It's just there's a lot of burdens on somebody running their own operation.
100%, 98% of the people over here in the chat know, they're all authors. Like, they know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah,
man, 100%.
Yeah.
Peter, thank you so much for hanging out. Everybody that was live, thank you. Everybody that watches on replay,
thank you. Everybody who tuned in tonight. Really like having you there. I didn't read all the comments, but I will go back and look.
Amazing. We will see y'all very, very soon.
Yeah, anytime, Matt. You let me know.
Thank you.
All right.